just to introduce myself, I'm Jenny Fulton and I head up our growth division here at Emperor, where we focus on the communication needs of AIM, small cap and progressive FTSE 250 clients. And just want to extend a massive welcome to what we hope is going to be an hour packed full of helpful insights and examples from our recent review of AIM annual reports. I'm joined this morning by Rachel Crossley and Tim Markley from our consultancy team, who are going to be taking us through the findings of our review. We also have my good colleague James Alexander, who is going to be interviewing our star guest this morning, the fabulous Louise Raffel, Director of Corporate Relations at Central Asia Metals. And Louise is going to be sharing a little of their reporting journey and the move towards a more integrated approach. So huge thanks to Louise for joining us this morning. We are really looking forward to hearing you speak. So just wanted to set the scene with a little bit of context. I think it's a really exciting time for AIM companies. Despite the challenges of the last year and the pandemic, the AIM market itself is booming. And it feels like not a day goes by without an announcement of another IPO. And if we look at last year, the AIM All Share Index rose 22% in 2020, making it the most active growth market in Europe. This is really reflecting the rising appeal of AIM to the investment community, including institutional investors. And more than ever before, AIM is home to many companies with a strong and compelling investment case, and there's an audience waiting to hear it. The focus too on sustainability continues to grow, with investors, employees, consumers, and other key stakeholder groups really wanting to understand a company's approach. And with the COVID pandemic making 2020 anything but business as usual for most, companies have got a real chance to break free from the traditional focus on short-term financial performance by telling a fresh, dynamic, and more forward-looking story with purpose, culture, stakeholders and sustainability centre stage. I think companies then can demonstrate much more long-term thinking. So how are companies grasping the opportunity? This year we reviewed the first 33 AIM 100 annual reports published before May across a range of metrics, really just to identify how disclosure is evolving. And so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rachel and Tim just to take us through the findings.
Thanks, Jenny. And great to be here to talk to you all today. Yes, it's been fascinating to review this year's selection of reports and see the range of approaches and channels and visuals that companies are using to talk about their performance and really tell that story. So we're going to provide an overview of the findings and some of the good practice examples that we've identified. So to start off with the 6 key trends that have emerged this year. Holistic storytelling, taking a joined up and consistent approach. Future focused reporting, so not all about past performance, but also a forward perspective. More show, less tell, with performance, case studies and examples to bring reporting to life. The real focus of the year, taking sustainability seriously and how companies have evolved their approach and reporting. On the other hand, governance disclosure remains static and compliance led, but changing channels and changing audiences, and familiar channels as stakeholders use a range of different formats and channels to access the information they're looking for. So the first of those, holistic storytelling, and the best AIM reports are now demonstrating how everything they do is aligned to their purpose and to the long-term success of the company, and using their purpose to tell that joined up and consistent narrative. Why is purpose so important? Well, I think Larry Fink from BlackRock sums it up very well over here. Without a sense of purpose, no company, whether public or private, can achieve its full potential. It will ultimately lose the license to operate from its key stakeholders. And this year in our report, we've seen a lot more companies including a purpose statement. 57% set out why they exist more broadly, beyond just making money. And more importantly, 27% now use their purpose statement as part of their corporate narrative framework, set purpose at the core, and explain why it's important and how it contributes to long-term success. And as I mentioned, sustainability, the core focus of the year. We've seen much more integration of sustainability issues more fully across the corporate narrative. 33% of the companies we reviewed are starting to integrate or fully integrating sustainability issues across their corporate narrative. So moving on to look at some of the good practice examples. So a couple that join the dots across the corporate narrative, leading with purpose at the core. And Nichols here has a visual framework that sets out how their purpose, we make life taste better, is linked to both their sustainability and their corporate framework, and underpinned by their values and the foundations of the business, their people, brands, partnerships, and technology. Central Asia Metals also takes a purpose-driven approach, and as we heard previously, Louise is going to tell us a bit more about that in a few minutes, but linking the purpose to the values, strategic objectives, and long-term value creation for stakeholders. An area that smaller companies and indeed larger companies too have often struggled with is demonstrating the role that culture and values play in driving performance and long-term success. And particularly important, of course, for smaller companies which often have a very strong culture. So two examples of companies that have done that well this year: Alliance Pharma, which has stakeholder-focused splash pages articulating how their values are embedded across the business, and Keyword Studios, which describes culture as the glue that binds all Keywordians together, and has this opening spread which sets it out, and further spreads setting out their values and how they're put into practice across the company.
Thank you, Rachel. Future focus reporting. So yeah, as Jenny kind of touched on in her intro, it's obviously been an unusual year with disruption to ways of working and limited ability to make money for many companies. With short-term performance potentially impacted by the pandemic, companies have instead taken the opportunity to reassure their investors by looking ahead and being positive about the future prospects, especially given the nature of the expected economic recovery. So what does future focus reporting mean? Well, we think it means a better balance of reporting against the year, but also discussing what's ahead. This can be done by reaffirming the opportunities presented by market trends, by explicitly demonstrating long-term strengths and differentiators, reassuring the reader about risk controls, and more clearly presenting a picture of long-term viability and success. In the sample we looked at, it meant more investment cases, more and better market overviews with a greater focus on opportunities. It meant increased inclusion of specific strategic plans and objectives, and it meant more risk management content within the strategic report, with 85% of reports this year featuring that, compared with only 59% last year. So if we move on to some examples, here's an investment case from Uniphar: concise and engaging explanation of key reasons to invest, including industry experience, financial strength, and a compelling market opportunity. It's really just a way to focus the key kind of strengths of the business in one spread up front. A market overview from Keyword Studios. It discusses the market context for the year, and then, as well as an explanation of the key industry trends and how the company is well positioned to benefit from those in the short, medium, and long-term future. Here's a clear and graphical risk management spread from Advanced Medical Solutions. Discusses roles and responsibilities, process, and includes a heat map to demonstrate how risks have changed during the year, all of which combine to provide more context to the risk tables and tell a more comprehensive overall story of risk. And finally, EMIS Group. EMIS complies with the full UK Corporate Governance Code, and under provision 31, they include a discussion of their prospects via a viability statement. This statement includes scenario planning, which reinforces the risk management story and shows consideration of emerging risks, which ultimately reaffirm its positive view of its long-term potential success. Moving on to the third trend we identified, more show, less tell. So companies are rightly putting more emphasis on what lies ahead, and we like that. The report obviously still has a job to do in terms of telling the story of the past financial year. For us, more show and less tell means including more focused and impactful examples of actions and achievements from the year. This is an ideal
Oh, I think we might have lost Tim, unless that's my Wi-Fi. Slightly awkward moment. Tim, are you back again? We lost you for a second there. The joys of
I'm
Zoom.
sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Sorry, where did I get to?
You got to future strategy spreads. So.
Okay, I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
So yeah, so more show, less tell. It meant this year it meant specifically presenting the impact of COVID where appropriate. As we keep saying, COVID made it a very unusual year. So if the business model or strategy was particularly affected by COVID, that needed to be demonstrated. So what did we see in the sample? Well, the number of reports, including case studies, rose from last year with strategy in action, COVID responses and sustainability all popular topics for inclusion. And also Section 172 has obviously been a key focus in reporting in the last 2 years. And we believe the most meaningful way of demonstrating that requirement in action is to include examples of principled decisions and stakeholder consideration. And the number of companies doing that also rose this year. So we take a look at some examples. Here's an example from Midwich, who demonstrated that their strategy had to take a backseat this year. They'd had to put a short-term strategic focus on mitigating risks and recovery. And this is just an excellent way of demonstrating that, which was something that not really enough reports demonstrated this year. Here's smart metering systems, priorities in action, which sits within its COVID response section. In action is really a word that we love, 2 words we love to see. Going beyond words to show what plans and priorities actually mean in practice for the various stakeholders. Moving on, we've got Ergomed's strategy in action, that term in action again. Strategy in action means a great way to show progress and evidence that you're delivering on strategic goals beyond just having a kind of concise strategy table. Finally, Johnson Service Group, not the most visually engaging example that we're going to show today, but an excellent example of a company including multiple board decisions and demonstrating how they consider key stakeholders as a part of their board decision-making process.
Thanks, Tim. So on to our 4th trend, and the one that we've had by far the most questions and conversations about this year, sustainability reporting. And it's really encouraging to see AIM companies taking sustainability seriously, and the quality and quantity of reporting on sustainability has really improved this year and continues to increase and evolve. And as we know, that's driven by growing demand from stakeholders and particularly from investors. And again, we see a quote from Larry Fink, which really emphasizes that point. So as he says, in order to attract BlackRock's money, the company must now show how it makes a positive contribution to society. So what does that mean for the reports we've seen this year? Well, 85% of companies now have a separate sustainability section in their annual report, and that's up from just over 70% last year. So a big improvement to a very high level. A range of names, and we've had a lot of discussions around what should this be called. ESG is the one that has taken over, I think reflecting the investor focus on this area for the annual report. But sustainability and responsible business also rank highly. In terms of what's in that section, well, over half of companies, 52%, now identify their material issues. So those issues that are most relevant to the business. And 21% go further and present a clear sustainability strategy, which sets out their commitments and targets against focus areas that are based on those material issues that they've identified. So external frameworks have previously been not really an area of focus for AIM companies, but more companies this year are starting to look at frameworks and initiatives, particularly the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And 36% of the companies reference this with varying levels of success. So what does this look like in practice? Well, here's an example from Breedon, who's been building their approach this year and point out that they are very much on this journey. So as you can see, they've undertaken a materiality assessment and they set out the findings in a clear matrix and use that to set out the key sustainability topics and the relevant SDGs that they're aligned to. UNIFAR also set out their strategic priorities, but also a focus on governance. Very important to talk about how this is sustainability is being managed and governed at a board and senior management level. A nice visual to do that. Then talking about performance. So not only the pillars, but how have you performed against these during the year? And an example from Central Asia Metals, highlights for the year, and also focus areas for the year ahead, what they would like to achieve, and a case study to help bring that to life. And then looking at those external frameworks and initiatives. So I mentioned the SDGs. Alliance Pharma is one of those companies that does that well. They've identified 5 relevant SDGs for their business, and then they talk about how they are contributing or aim to contribute against each of those goals specifically. And then SMS is one of the few that goes further, talking about other external frameworks that they are aligned to or working towards, such as the Carbon Disclosure Project and TCFD, Task Force on Climate Related Financial Disclosures. Again, that's something we're getting asked about all the time. Main market companies in particular are very focused on reporting against this, and we've seen a massive improvement this year. AIM companies are also starting to think about this. We do have 21% referencing TCFD in their reporting, mostly to say that they're on that journey and will be improving their disclosure in years to come. So a good starting point. Governance reporting, on the other hand, remains static and compliance-led for the most part. And that's a shame, I think, because there's a real opportunity there for companies to tell a more engaging and transparent governance story. It's obviously important and has grown increasingly important for investors and to a company's reputation. But according to this Small Cap IR report by our magazine, it's the 3rd most cited challenge faced by buy side and sell side when evaluating small cap companies, just in terms of finding information. So there's definitely more that can be done. So 76% of our sample adopted the QCA, Corporate Governance Code for smaller companies, but that's actually down from last year, I think reflecting some move towards the UK Corporate Governance Code, which main market companies report against. There are some positive elements. 45% do include a more meaningful discussion of board activities and focus areas during the year, rather than generic matters reserved for the board. However, there's limited information on board skills and experience, and that's an opportunity to do more there. Diversity reporting, an area of focus, is also lacking, and only 21% include senior management biographies, and that's a missed opportunity to bring out the breadth and depth of your senior management team, in our view. Another area we've been asked a lot about this year is ESG committee reporting, and a number of companies have set up ESG committees during the year. 24% do reference a committee or a form of decision making with governance oversight at board level for ESG, and we do have 9% that feature a dedicated report this year for their ESG committee in the governance section, alongside their nomination and audit committee reports. So this was one of the good examples of focusing on skills and experience. Keyword Studios, they have shorter biographies in their annual reports, which really bring out the skills and the experience of their team. And then they reference the website for more information and full biographies of the team in line with the AIM Rule 26 disclosure. So that really helps to bring it to life. So Breedon is one of the few that reports in a bit more detail on diversity and includes some clear graphs and charts to show their balance on the board across a range of metrics, also one of the only ones to talk about their ethnicity balance and actually articulates that this year, and that will be an area of focus going forward. A couple more examples just to show Ergomed. Again, not the most engaging example, but does talk in a tailored way about the key areas of governance focus during the year and what they've been looking at. And then finally, there's an example from Gamma Communications of an ESG committee report. And as you can see, that's laid out similar to other committees' report, sets out the membership, their responsibilities, and some of the key achievements and highlights of the year.
Thanks, Rachel. Hopefully I get through this without any more technical difficulties. But yeah, as we've kind of seen this year, with many of us working from home, and as well as sustainability considerations rising up the agenda for stakeholders, the physical printed annual report continues to become less important with each year, and really shouldn't be driving considerations around format content anymore. That said, the vast majority of the AIM companies we looked at remain satisfied with a PDF report for now, and we didn't really see any movement towards digital first landscape formats which work better online like we've seen in the main market this year. Dedicated microsites and online summaries remain rare, with only 2 companies investing in those despite the benefits that they can bring. But one of the reasons they do remain unpopular is that many companies are now actually embedding annual report content into their website instead, properly leveraging the work that goes into the annual report and ensuring consistent messaging across channels. A majority of companies, 67%, now do this in some way, although the results do remain varied. We think the corporate website remains the ideal way to cut clutter in the report. Static sustainability policies and QTA governance code compliance statements, for instance, are really best left to the website and can present an opportunity to improve the annual report itself. Finally, we saw limited growth in dedicated sustainability reports, but there were more than last year. And as sustainability sections get longer and strategies become more sophisticated, those sections will outgrow the annual report, and we only expect to see more and more standalone reports on the horizon. To look at some examples, EMIS's concise and engaging digital summary report provides a high-level overview of the report's key statistics and messages in a one-page online summary, which remains a best practice approach, whereas Gamma Communications invested in a full annual report microsite with interactive features and functionality which brought the report's content to life. Here's, on the next slide, a couple of examples of content we've already shown in the presentation, now in its online format from Central Asian Metals and Uniphar. Embedding this content online ensures this information can reach the greatest audience possible, and that anyone accessing the website can immediately see the latest messaging and everything is consistent and up to date. Finally, once the main sustainability story does kind of outgrow the annual report and you take the plunge on doing a full sustainability report, you obviously, the question then emerges of how do you deal with sustainability within the annual report still, because obviously there's still a story to be told. And here's a couple of nice concise summaries examples that we saw. Serica Energy takes an achievement focused one page essentially approach, while MP Evans has a slightly longer section that features high level engaging infographics to explain its the overall kind of sustainability of its approach.
Thanks, Rachel and Tim. And so turning trends into action, what does this mean for next year's reporting? And in truth, we think these trends present a range of opportunities, as whilst we're seeing many AIM reports stepping up and expanding and improving their reporting, the gap between the strongest and the weakest reporters is growing. And so I think there's a lot that can be learned from the best examples. As I mentioned earlier, we're really delighted to have Louise, Director of Corporate Relations at Central Asian Metals, with us this morning. And just before I hand over to her and James, I think it's worth just flagging their report is a really good example to look at. It's a truly purpose-driven approach, is communicated and reflects how their strategy and values are clearly aligned to this. The importance of sustainability to their business really comes through with this clearly integrated across their corporate strategy and operations. And it also has great examples and stories around their progress and performance, really applying that principle of more show, less tell. So in short, it tells a really joined up and consistent story. So I'm now going to hand over to James and Louise to tell us more.
Thank you, Jenny, and welcome, Louise. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, James. Thank you. Thanks, Jenny.
But before we get started and hear more about Central Asia Metals' reporting and sustainability journey, I just want to give a little bit of kind of background on kind of what they do to kind of give a little bit more kind of context. So Central Asia Metals, I'm sure many of you know, Central Asia Metals produce base metals, I should say safely and sustainably, that are essential for modern day living. And I think I'm right in saying, Louise, that you listed on the AIM market in 2010, and 2 years later were producing copper from your newly built plant in Kounrad, Kazakhstan.
That's right.
And then 4 years later, you acquired a zinc and lead mine in Sasa, North Macedonia. And I think it's probably fair to say it's been a fantastic growth story, but also, you know, along that whole journey, you've provided, you know, fantastic shareholder return. And Louise has been, I think, absolutely instrumental in integrating and aligning the values of the business, the culture, the purpose, the strategy and sustainability across these two businesses, which is by no means a small feat. So, Louise, question for you. Your report stands out as a great example of joined up reporting, and you also have a clear sustainability strategy as well as publishing a separate sustainability report. Can you just give us a bit more colour and insights about the process you've been through to involve your strategy and develop a more integrated approach to your reporting?
Yeah, sure, absolutely, and thank you. Yeah, I think we've worked hard over the past couple of years in particular to really try and kind of move our reporting forwards, both in terms of sustainability reporting and also trying to, you know, keep making improvements on the annual reports as well. And last year we did quite a bit of work on that. In terms of sort of the integration of the whole process, really, from kind of our purpose through to creating value for our stakeholders. I think one of the most instrumental things we did last year actually was we did a workshop with our senior management team with Rachel here from Emperor, who led that with us. To really flesh out our strategy to help us to articulate it. And I think, I'm sure other senior management teams are the same. You know, we all sort of, you know, we know what we're doing and where we're going, but we would all probably explain it in a slightly different way. So it was super useful to have this session and all sit down and kind of agree, you know, on these three core strategic objectives for the near term, and then the longer term one being to grow, you know, ideally by acquisition. So we had this session, which was great. And I think once you've sort of firmed up and articulated your kind of strategy, you've got your strategic objectives, including sustainability as well in there. And then once you've got that, we focus on, well, how do we measure that? So we measure it with our KPIs. And then with that, you kind of bring a remuneration and a governance aspect, because you make sure you align your long-term incentive plan, your LTIPs and your STIPs, your bonuses, with performance for the KPIs as well. And then obviously, of course, to achieve that, you've got to manage your risks carefully and also your opportunities. So the whole risk management piece sort of comes into that. And essentially, I think as a business, if you balance all that and manage that well, you will have fulfilled your purpose, which is, as James says, in our case, is to produce the base metals that are essential for modern living. And you should also, therefore, have created value for all your stakeholders. So obviously your shareholders is an important stakeholder in terms of dividends and share price appreciation, but there's also your employees, treating them properly and fairly, the communities, paying your taxes, and therefore the government as a stakeholder, suppliers, etc. So I think that the main thing is, once you kind of thought all that through, then everything links together logically from sort of start to finish it in your business model. And this slide here that James has put up, our purpose-driven approach, was really our attempt to, I suppose, explain that and articulate it. And I think from our perspective, you know, my understanding of how the investors think is this is really important to them to get a feel for this integration, because investors are in particular, as one stakeholder, are looking for evidence that good principles of ESG are embedded throughout your whole business, because only then will you have a strong business, a responsible business, and as Jenny said early on, a business that's fit for the long term as well. And so that's really what we were trying to demonstrate.
Thank you, Louise. That's as you say, been quite sort of a lot of information on that. So really interesting. And just you kind of touched upon it, but I just kind of want to drill down a little bit more into the kind of the ESG and sustainability. And as we've heard this morning from Rachel and Tim, it's very much the kind of the subject of conversation at the moment. Can you take us through kind of how you really kind of developed your sustainability framework over the last couple of years, and also importantly, kind of what benefits you've seen to the business by doing this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think going back sort of 2.5 years ago is when we really realised we needed to kind of up our game, I guess, in sort of substantial sustainability reporting. And we got that feedback from our shareholders, from potential new investors, and also from the likes of sustainability rating agencies like MSCI and Sustainalytics. So we did a lot of initial work there, research into what could be expected of us. And we really started with deriving our kind of sustainability framework, which is in those 5 pillars, the material topics on that slide there. So we've got these 5 material topic areas, which are kind of what you would expect from a mining company, at least probably many businesses anyway, but it's basically good governance, looking after health and safety, focusing on your employees, treating them properly, developing them, etc., caring for the environment, and generating value for the communities. And so each of our material topics kind of fed into those 5 main pillars. And then we reported on them in our first standalone sustainability report, which we published in Q2 last year. That was kind of our best foot forward report, really. It was our starter report. And we knew that we needed to improve from there, really. So after that, last year, we did some initial, we did some extra work, which was really, we went back and did a full stakeholder engagement and questionnaire with major stakeholders to ask them what they thought were the most important topics to them. We did some training for the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, which is one reporting structure that some companies choose to go down. And so we were able to report the next report to GRI. And we also identified some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which is on that bottom picture there, which we thought we were best placed to help to improve on the basis that we had sort of firmed up targets and goals in those areas. And the last part of that was actually firming up and articulating some targets for improvement as well and for the future. So the second report we wrote, which we published in Q2 this year, incorporated all of that. And I feel therefore was probably a sort of a higher quality of report than the first one, which was a good sort of starter piece. And I feel like hopefully we kind of set fair for our structure of reporting going forward. The one thing though that I think is really important, it has been for us and it would be for any other company, is while we've only been reporting more meaningfully on sustainability in the last couple of years, the important aspect is we have been doing it on the ground, so to speak, for since, from the start of operations. We've had a sustainability director, a guy called Nick Shirley, who's been with us since 2013, and him and his team have been managing really well all of the sustainability aspects for us. So a couple of years ago, when I came to do my research into what sorts of things companies were reporting on, and I was saying to Nick, are you collecting data on greenhouse gas emissions, water use, disturbed land? I mean, he answered yes to all these questions. So we did have the data, and I think that's a really important point, because I think to try to report meaningfully on sustainability, if you've not got the depth and you've not got the data, I think it possibly wouldn't come through authentic enough, really, because I think you need to have that depth in order to report well. So I think if there's any positives in our reporting, it's really due to to Nick and his team and how good a job they do on the ground, really.
Fantastic, thank you, Louise. And by kind of doing the kind of the framework and the huge amount of kind of embedding within the business, have you kind of seen any real kind of benefits to the kind of the business operations and how you've kind of managed things internally?
Yeah, I think it definitely it helps from from the external perspective and through to the site, because it's quite clear from all aspects how much we care about this and how important it is to us. And this is a message I think that is clear to our teams on the ground. That sustainability, safety, and those aspects do come first and foremost before anything else. And I believe that we have kind of embedded that message throughout, and it really is integrated into everything we do. I mean, Nick Shirley and his team, they don't kind of work in a silo on their own. He's embedded in all aspects of what we do in terms of production and anything which may impact his area. So it's definitely a holistic approach, which means that sustainability and ESG aspects are felt throughout the whole business.
Fantastic. And lastly, what kind of tips and advice would you have for others?
Yeah, I think I've got two main tips. I think the first one is to speak to your investors, speak to your shareholders. And I did that. I've now had 3 sets of meetings with our major shareholders. The first was when we first realised that we needed to up our game, as I say, in terms of reporting, because I didn't really know where to start. So I thought the logical place to me was to start with the investors that were sort of giving us a feel for the fact that we needed to improve. So set up a round of meetings with myself and our chairman, actually, and we went to see them and asked them what they were looking for from us. And we're then able to put some of those practices and those ideas into our first report. After we published our first report, we went to see them again. Well, this time it was virtual, obviously, last year, but we had virtual meetings with them again and said, right, we've put our first report out. Are you happy with it? What else would you like to see for us? And then we've just completed another sort of, I suppose, results feedback reporting roadshow with them again a month or so back, asking the same question, really. Are we getting there? Are you happy with what you're seeing? So that will be my first piece of advice. Not only are they willing to talk to you, I think they want to talk to you, because they are keen to improve the ESG credentials of the businesses that they're investing in, and they're also keen to be seen to be engaging with the companies as well. So I would be really surprised if you didn't get an open door for meetings and and help and tips. So definitely that's my first tip. And I think the second one is just to start somewhere. I think to have the confidence to start somewhere. I think probably if others, senior management team members are thinking, oh, we're not perfect, is it too daunting to start because we haven't got all our ducks in a row, we haven't got all our boxes ticked? I think the key message is to start the reporting, be transparent and open, say what you're good at, say what you need to improve on, and then put pen to paper as to how you may be able to improve that. And then once doing that, you will then want to improve in those areas because you've sort of promised that you will. And all in all, the whole effort moves forward from all these businesses. And over time, the ESG credentials of all these companies improves and moves forward, which I think in general has got to be a good thing. So I think, yeah, have a go, I suppose, is my second tip.
Brilliant. Thank you, Louise. Louise, that's been really informative, and your insights and recommendations have been very helpful. So a big thank you from us.
No problem. Thanks, James.
A big thanks, Louise. It's so helpful, isn't it, to understand a bit of the journey behind what we see in the report. And I think there are loads of real nuggets in there. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions for Louise. So please do feel free to drop those into the chat and we'll come back to them at the end. So just to round things up, 4 recommendations to take into 2021. Firstly, just the importance of telling a joined up and consistent story. We've talked about the importance of articulating your broader social purpose and demonstrating how this aligns to your culture, strategy and stakeholders outcomes to achieve that long-term success. But it's important not to just view your annual report in isolation. Really think about how that story is rolled out across the different channels and consider where information is best placed. Not everything has to sit in the annual report. With good signposting, so much can be effectively housed on the website. And also just ensuring that there's consistency of message across channels. The annual report process generates so much rich content. Is this updated and reflected in the website? Does the investor presentation really work in union with it? Does the amount of sustainability content warrant a separate sustainability report? And are you tapping into the opportunity that video or animation present just to bring some of the stories to life? And then our second key takeaway goes back to really a common theme that we've had all through this morning, just about getting serious about sustainability. And whilst we've seen a real increase in companies including a sustainability section in their report, the gap between those who are reporting an authentic sustainability story and those that you could argue are perhaps greenwashing, looking to tick a box, is really widening and becoming increasingly obvious. And we expect to see more companies called out on this. So communicating a clear approach around sustainability is important. And I think Louise made some really excellent points about, starting where you're at and it being honest and transparent, because that approach is going to be unique for everyone. Not everyone. We've heard from a mining company this morning. It's going to be very different for financial services, for example. But I think it's really worth recapping some of the key principles of those reporting well. They provide proper context that demonstrates a real understanding of what those material issues for the business and for its stakeholders. So Louise talked about that process of engaging with stakeholders and investors to understand what matters to them, but also the research behind understanding those material issues for the business. So is that something that you've had in place? And then the other thing that we really saw was that they communicate an aligned plan or strategy with clear focus areas and commitments, but importantly with measurable targets and KPIs. So is there clarity and alignment around your sustainability ambitions? Again, I thought it was really interesting, Louise was saying about that importance of getting everyone internally aligned. And sometimes there's conversations that need to happen around that. And are you articulating a clear and a measurable plan, even if that's small to begin with? And then finally, they share the stories and the proof points that demonstrate progress, and as Louise talked about, that relevant performance data. And I think it's really important to note, again, going back to what Louise was saying, it's starting where you're at. You don't need to achieve everything in year one. It's definitely, to use the cliche, a journey. But credibility really shines through when you're reporting a full and honest picture in this way. And traditional reports have been backwards looking, but it's important to provide that forward perspective, looking to the future. And it needs to be balanced, setting out the opportunities and how you're responding to them and the benefits and the potential that they present. But then to refer back to Tim's earlier point, it's not only the positives, it's expanding your risk reporting and articulating the emerging risks to the business and the strategies that you're putting in place to manage them. And then our fourth recommended action is all about just bringing your reporting to life. I think in a time where there are so many companies vying for investors' attention, don't hide your story away in reams of dry narrative. Evidence action by using impactful case studies to provide those real life examples of achievements and developments during the year. And make your section 172 statement more meaningful. Include clear and tangible examples of board decision making in practice, and Hotel Chocolat is do a really great job of this. So a report well worth taking a look at. And then it has to be said, come on guys, that area that is still lagging in so many reports as we've heard today, this is the year to make your governance reporting more engaging and tailored. Focused on board activities and relevant issues such as diversity and succession planning, rather than taking that compliance-led approach. these sections don't have to be dry and boring. Inject some life with charts and infographics and other design devices that will help to make the information clearer, more accessible and connected. And to finish, a final example to share. This year at Empra, we published our own annual report for the first time to celebrate our first year of being an employee-owned business. So after years of advising clients, we got to sit on the other side of the fence and enjoy all the joys of auditors holding up proceedings, proofing rounds and all that fun. And this is just a short trailer of the report that we produced for the website and social media channels. It wasn't costly. We simply used the assets that we created for the report and then repurposed them. But it's just a really lovely example of how you can package up the highlights of a report and create a useful tool that can really help to bring that story to life.